Hello, everybody. Are you ready for week 4, right? Week 4, talking about poetic forms. So, Colleen Anderson, Jamal Hodge,
Yep.
Maxwell I. Gold. We have all the geniuses in the room ready to
Where?
talk about how to put all this together. So, welcome everybody in chat. We've already got people saying hi, and yeah, let's get into this. Everybody should have a handout which has some exercises on it and stuff. And yeah, I'm sorry, I'm running a little bit last minute this week, so you got those late last night. But
nothing like midnight reading, right?
I know that's when I best time to send emails. So let's start out by talking about forms, a little bit about you guys' favorite forms. Obviously, I've talked a lot about haiku and how much I love haiku. The reasons why I like it is because I find it a huge, like a puzzle to try to fit what I'm trying to say in those few lines. And I do stick with the 575 syllabic, even though we've had that whole discussion about you don't necessarily have to do that with haiku. So how about you guys? We have some interesting formists in this virtual space, this virtual room. What are some of you guys' favorite forms?
Well, for me, it's the only other form I use mainly beyond free verse is Fibonacci. I just like it because to me it's like almost like designing a escalating song. Where you have like one, then two, then three, then five, then eight, and then 13, and I just like the syllables and how they build up, and I don't know. I just really like. I learned it from Linda Addison, and I became addicted. I know I complained a lot about like, yo, what's the point of forms, man? This is like restricting. This is bullshit. But like, playing around with that, it's like the limitation creates more possibilities in a sense because it forces you to think different, which is forces you to expand your mind and really explore what you're trying to say or build or create. So, yeah, there's a lot of value in these poetic forms.
Yeah, I like forms. I'm actually going to use my crystal ball and go. I think Max's favorite form is prose poem.
I've heard that. I've heard that about him.
But I don't like. I like trying different forms. I like the weird constrictiveness of Sestina. So that's the one that's 39 lines. So I know Angela put out the thing about 35 lines, but if anybody wants to try a Sestina, it's 39 lines.
That's why I said it's a guide, not
exactly.
a rule.
And villanelle, which is also difficult. It's difficult to do because the moment you get into rhyme, the thing is to not fall into the most easy rhymes out there, but to have sublime rhyme.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like I've done a septilette and a nonnet, which are basically their poems of like, I think a nonnet is like 9 lines and a septilette is 7 lines, but some of them have certain syllables within them. So I just like kind of trying them because it restricts, and then it's like the form is not just about how many lines or syllables, but if you can use that form visually to add to the poem. And I know some of the people I've been receiving poems from, I've mentioned that when they're working in forms, that part of it is that visual aspect of like a Fibonacci. Something is growing, and if you're doing the Fibonacci that grows and then brings it down again, what can you do with that form? Mm-hmm. What can you do with a form that goes from like, a whole bunch of syllables and gets smaller, or the mere palindrome? So, I did one that was a dragon. And so the mere palindrome forms a dragon visually. So that's, part of it is that, are you adding emphasis to your words because you've got a line and then there's a word that says drop and you drop it to the next line, which actually can be without form as well.
I guess so. Yes, prose poetry is technically a form, but if you're doing it, I guess in a more formal way, it is you're doing like paragraph stanza, and then paragraph stanza, so that and I guess concrete poetry, where you have stanza and then there is some sort of visual aspect, whether you're trying to create some sort of picture, some sort of image, or you're jumping from one line to another. Those are most of the forms that I like to play with. Like I actually I'm working on one right now where it kind of goes like a triangle. It creates a triangle. Linda actually wrote something like that in Other Terrors, where it was a triangle. But I like those just because I don't really have to worry about I don't have to worry about syllable count or it rhyming or anything like that. But concrete poetry or prose poetry, and even free verse can have a form. Like there is somewhat of a structure when you are playing around with free verse, because I'm reading some poetry about Charles Bukowski right now, and if you haven't, Charles Bukowski's poetry is very raw and gritty, and I would highly recommend it. But even some of his free verse is it'll you'll have one stanza that it'll be like several lines and then just one word, then one word, and then a break. So that's just another way to play around with free verse if you just want to have some impact.
I like that. I had a nice segue into the next question, which was going to be, what purpose do forms have in creativity? Jamal. No. but let's answer Pixie's first real quick. Pixie asks, is slant rhyme considered rhyme if it has assonance and syllable match? I don't know. I think like labels are unimportant, honestly, but I would say not really, because it's not technically rhyme, but also like it can be whatever you want because it's poetry and there's no rules. Like you can call it whatever you want, make up your own form, which we will get to.
And if it's slant rhyme, it's slant rhyme. So in fact, it is its own thing. But
that's kind of what I think too.
Yeah. And really you're right. I mean, it's less about what it's called, but more about, does it work? Like if you're going to rhyme part of a poem, like I actually did this in one poem where I started out with it rhyming because it was like, someday my prince will come, playing off the song, and it was all kind of like all fairy tale pretty, and then it just breaks down into a prose poem because it was like my character's going, well, fuck that, I'm not gonna play with the dishwasher, I'm going off on my own. And so it was like breaking out of the fairy tale pastiche. But again, so I took form and I broke it in the middle of my poem on purpose.
Yeah.
But you can make your own form, and it's really like, does it work within the poem?
Yeah. What do you guys think on Pixie's question? I'll put it back up.
Yes. Lots of deep pondering.
And there you have it, Pixie. All right. We also have another question. You guys, I'm not going to have to work and make up questions anymore at this rate. Tom Golden asks, does a sonnet have to follow the exact rhyme scheme of a Shakespearean or Petrarchan part?
Say that fast 3 times.
I just want to say why I'm a writer and not a speaker. How do you say that, Max? Petrarchan?
Petrarchan. I would say for something like this, yes. I would say absolutely yes. Like Italian sonnets, Shakespearean sonnets, like
because that's actually the form.
That is the form. And I know we say no rules, but there are some forms of poetry that if you're going to write them, you have to respect the rules, or else it is not.
Yeah.
Or else you cannot call it a sonnet.
The rule is that you don't have to write those. But if you do want to write them, nobody will know what they are. They're technically not going to be that thing if it doesn't follow that exact scheme. Like you can't do a Fibonacci without using that form, because then it's something else. It's not a Fibonacci.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, there are rules to some forms, but and Pixie's asked the slant rhyme is shoe tissue.
Oh yeah.
Let's talk about William Blake and Tiger Tiger Burning Bright. Like that poem, he does slant rhyme in that poem. So yeah, I mean it's been done for a long time, and it's totally totally fine to do that. And in fact,
Yeah.
especially if you're trying to get away from something that's a little too rhymey-wimey, then it might be the way to go.
Yeah, and if she meant like the example is shoe and tissue, glass and gas, and I would say yes, that would count as
Absolutely
a slant rhyme. And then KT Wagner, this is going to be like the easiest class ever because I'm like, oh, just look at the questions in chat. KT says she's going to need wine to write form poetry. Wine is okay. No rules. Nobody's going to judge anybody for anything. I tend to like a dulce de leche, like a jar of dulce de leche when I write poetry. But that is why there's a handout with a bunch, like, I think, did I do 10 forms, examples with the numbers and how to break it down? So you guys can just use that as well. It's kind of like playing.
You did 5 forms, and you even put in a sonnet, acrostic, cinquain, Fibonacci.
Yep.
And I don't know, is that 5? Tanka.
Yeah. It felt like 10 last night when I was writing it.
And I run away if you told me to write a sonnet.
Are you going to write a sonnet? Is that what I just heard?
No, I said I'd run away if you told me to write a sonnet.
Oh, yeah.
I think I'm going to do a sonnet to check it off my bucket list. And I definitely, KT, I'm going to need wine for that one.
You had to write that crazy sonnet for like a prose sonnet or something like that, Max. So for that Shakespeare.
For Shakespeare Unleashed,
Oh yeah,
this one. So
yeah, that scared me. I didn't even submit to that anthology.
Yeah, me too. I was like, nope.
I wanted to, but I got busy. But anyways, okay, back on track. We've had our caramel salt chocolate. Wow, I really can't speak today. Caramel salt chocolate comment from Diane. And I agree that should be an assignment. That is now your assignment, Diane. And write a satirical sonnet about caramel salt chocolate. Right, going on to this, my segue, which is now not really a segue anymore, but what purpose do forms have in creativity? And there is a really good video on that I shared in that handout. Probably nobody got a chance to look at it yet because I sent it out so late last night. But I love that video because basically saying, and this is my theory, my thought, and it doesn't mean it's the right one, that when you are super creative, you can just be absolutely, it's like a hurricane of ideas can come. You can't sleep at night. You've just got too many ideas. And so that's when you have a notebook like this one or this one. And there's a couple more sitting here. And they're just full of like little, oops, sorry, that's my mess. Don't look. Half-baked ideas. Too much creativity can be, you don't get anything done. But when you have structure or strict guidelines, then you can start stuffing that creativity into the guidelines, like Genevieve did with when the girls began to fall. And and I think it helps you to get that creativity out, to know that there's a limitation. Kind of like, I think it's a thing with toddlers, isn't it? And please, anybody who does a lot of stuff with kids, I'm no expert on this. But toddlers get upset, don't they, when they don't have structure? Isn't it like they start breaking down, small kids because they need the guidelines and the rules? I feel like that's how we are with structure.
Actors are like that too. Actors are like that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they're just big
kids. And children. Actors and children.
That's true. Having dated an actor or two, I think I can agree to that.
Well, and I'm going to say bassists as well then.
Bassists particularly. What about bongo drums, the beat guys,
It's going to be one of those classes where like next week nobody showed up. Why?
But you're basically saying that it helps with cohesion, right?
I think it helps with, like, it boosts creativity, in my opinion, because it gives you that, you don't have to think about the giant, massive cosmic cloud of ideas. You can hone it down to what will fit here. And then all of that's for another structure, form. And saying this, I don't really use a lot of form in my poetry. What do you guys think? Sorry.
What's the question?
Max
needs some form to the question.
What purpose do forms have in creativity? I'm kind of like the argument. Yeah, like some people say that it hampers creativity. Some people go the opposite and say it boosts creativity. What's your opinion?
Some people like who? Like some people like who?
Now, I'm
Me.
not mentioning names, Jamal.
Me.
I think
Problem with that? Come and talk to me.
so. So I think it depends. So like for me, when I so when I attempted that sonnet, you know, I wanted, you know,
Why?
you said why? Because I'm a masochist.
No,
You
I said
know,
wine.
Oh, I thought you said why. You know, I don't typically write in form or structure. So,
Yeah.
you know, my approach when I'm writing poetry in general is either I'm just going to write a bunch of notes. I'm going to either do just I'm going to start with a big picture anyway, regardless of whether there's structure. So I wrote a prose poem, and then I deconstructed it piece by piece, and then I put it back together. You know, and then I just kind of like, you know, so this is something else about sonnets, that sonnets don't have to rhyme. Not necessarily. They don't always have to rhyme. That's more of a modern take on a sonnet.
And they can have internal rhyme.
Yeah, and they can have it. Then they can have internal rhyme as well. This is not meant to be a class about sonnets. I'm not a sonnet expert, but like, so that's just you know when we're talking about building structure, you know, so like I just, you know, I researched the structure, whatever that structure was, and then I basically deconstructed it and then put it back together. At least that was my approach when I was going for something that I don't normally do. So for me, you know, I don't like structure. So I like to build it. I like to build my own structure if I'm going to write a poem that has a form.
Mm.
Well, you know, I kind of second what Max is saying. Like for me as well, I hate boundaries in general and all forms of boundaries. You know what I'm saying? So I'm always trying to like approach it with a sense of discovery and trying to see what find the meaning while I'm writing the poem. Sometimes I even start out with like a plan, you know, and from that chaos kind of like discern like where the story is, where the structure is, and then if it starts to fit into a structure that I know, then I can take it and then make it fit that structure because it's kind of like that. That's what I did with the Fibonacci when there was having the class and she had us do that. So I almost always have to start from a space of like chaos and possibilities and then dwindle it down into order. You know what I mean? That's what works for me. But I do see the wisdom in forms. It's almost like going to the gym for me. Even though I like free form, when I do form, it's like going to the gym and working out and getting my instruments sharp. Because by knowing these rules, it helps me break them in a better way. Or sometimes throw certain elements from each one together to make my own unique form, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I've never been in one of those before.
Well, you know, even a prose poem has form, right?
Yeah.
That's got the form of the prose poem. So, you know, it may not have more than the basic structure. And the same thing, like you can write free verse. And I was just looking through one of my books of poetry going like, oh, how many actual form poems do I have in here? It's like, well, one. But overall, I have form. I have
Elements.
I have put form into some of my poems, but it might be like you could write a call and response poem. It could be, you know, how do I like the air? You know, it's and then it can be responses, and you might have a call, 3 responses, a call, 3 responses. That's the form right there. So it may not be a known form, but you can do that, and a lot of people do that in their poetry all the time. They put in some structure, even it's the way you indent the lines. You may go with the structure of like 5 lines in each verse. So you're bringing in structure of your own kind and using it that way. And for me, like, you know, I've done far more free and blank verse than I've done form poetry, but I do like playing with the form because, you know, like I said earlier, like it can constrain, but in a way it can home the poem because now you're working within that particular poem and you have to be precise to fit the number of syllables. So like if you're doing a haiku or whatever. And I wrote a Sijo. Sijo is a Korean form. And it's another one of those mathematical ones where you basically have to have the number of, I think it's like, I'd have to look at it again, but it's I think 5 lines, but then they're grouped. So there's like 4 syllables, and then there's 4 syllables, and then it's 3 syllables and 4 syllables, and then 4 syllables and 3 syllables in the line. And they have to have kind of like a pause, like Anglo-Saxon verse, where I've only attempted one of those and not successfully. And that's kind of like what's been used in the Eddas too. It looks easy, and it's not. But so in that way, it's like playing with it and trying to get across the point using what seems like a simple form. To me, it adds just another level of my learning that I can then use even if I'm doing free verse.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do want to say to everybody watching, this is not saying you should use form or not use form. We're not trying to push anybody either way. And there's no one right way or wrong way. But this is just more discussing form and why you might want to use it and some of the opinions about it. And yeah, we definitely are not getting into the yes or no, because there's no rules. And it's all just based on who you are as a creator and as an artist. And I think it's funny that we do keep talking about, oh my God, now I can't think of the name of them.
Fibonacci?
Sonnets. No, sonnets.
Oh,
We keep talking about sonnets because I think like it's the poster child of form poetry. When everybody talks about poetry form in that like poetry form, it's like they usually bring up sonnet. But all right, this is like one of the reasons why I do love form is how do you think different poetry forms affect the overall impact or message of a poem? And that's, in some ways, I think form can really highlight what you're trying to say, like a Fibonacci, if you're trying to get like a sense of like maybe like danger, because it's like one small thing, then 2 things, and then 3 things, and it's magnifying and it's getting bigger, and you can kind of almost foster that feeling of like this is becoming too great, too fast in a Fibonacci, if you wanted to use it that way. Using a super sparse form or using like a pantoum where it's repeating in different ways and making its own meaning, you can have really horrific lines then, but with the automatic repeating, it doesn't overwhelm the reader as just like a lot of blah, horrible, horrible, horrible. It just gives like some nice texture and distance for a poem. So that's kind of why I do love forms a lot of times and knowing forms, because you can use forms as part of your communication. So what do you guys think about that? And then we have a question after this.
Max is going to ask, what was the question again? I can tell from the look on his face.
I was reading Diane's question. But yes, what was the question again?
How do different poetry forms affect the overall impact or message of a poem? But with like a way more creative presentation of that question, like before. You missed it. It was awesome.
Well, I think that sometimes, especially if we've got a poem and it's not working in the form it is, even if it's free verse, maybe that's when it's time to take it and try like deconstructing it into another form. Like maybe you have a prose poem and it's just not, you're not selling it. Try a haiku or vice versa, and just play with it, because I think sometimes you can have different impact in it. And if you're if you're down to 17 syllables as opposed to a 40 line poem, you're going to have, and maybe take a poem and write it in 3 different forms and see how you get that message across in that. But yeah, I think it does add impact, like like the pantoums and the ones that have like the villanelles as well, where you're repeating a line. That it adds its own emphasis, and that emphasis can play into that message you're getting across. Whereas in other ones, maybe you want that hard stop of that first syllable in a Fibonacci, or the last syllable in like a septilette.
I agree. I mean, it depends on the story you're telling, or the or you know, or that little snippet. Like I've taken prose poems and like deconstructed them into like free verse poems, you know, and you know, written them in like, you know, 8 or 9 like stanzas, you know, and so made them just a lot longer visually. And sometimes it changes the meaning of the poem originally. So yeah, I mean, I think what Colleen says is accurate in that respect. It just kind of, I think it just depends. It depends on how you want to, how you want to, how you want to illustrate that, like that moment.
And I would just say something cryptic like forms are the wardrobe of meaning, you know, something like that.
Forms are formidable.
Yeah.
Formaldehyde.
All right, Diane's question. I find in free verse I have writer tics. Is this a good thing? Do you have beat structures that you often instinctively return to? Do you try to disrupt that, or is then that your personal style? I say that's your personal style. When you have things that you repeatedly, I mean, unless it's like, for instance, using the word dark is one of my writer tics. No, that's not probably good because I, way overuse the word. I actually search it. I control F, find everywhere where I've said dark, and it's probably like 100 times in a haiku. And then I find other ways to say it or get rid of it. That's not a good writer tic. But if it's a writer tic, like not using capitalizations or, punctuations or certain stylings, I mean, I think that's a good thing. That is your style. That's how I would think of it. How about you guys?
I feel like I have a lot of bad writer tics, like the, there, and them. Because I come from like 3-act structures and like film, TV stuff, writing screenplays. So I'm always trying to write a screenplay even when I'm writing a poem. It's like in the back of my subconscious mind. And so I do that a lot. So I'm always consciously aware of like if I remove that, sometimes things flow better. Or I'm trying to always emphasize like I have to force the meaning or sometimes upon my reader. You know what I mean? And and sometimes it's good to leave a little space for interpretation and for just more interaction, engagement from the person who's receiving the poem. So some of my good tics, I like rhyme. I do like rhyme for some reason. I know that's like taboo now. Rhyme in poems
It's
is
not only bad rhyme is taboo.
Yeah.
But I like that, and I like escalation. I like things to build up to something and then slowly or dwindle down to something. I like throughout the different stanzas. I like there to be like either escalation or reduction to it. So that's just me. It's on my tics.
I think that's valid. Go ahead, Max.
I was gonna say, I think I guess if I had a bad take, I think I just used marble and granite and skull descriptions probably way too much. But in terms of like, I guess, beat structures, when I sometimes I tend to write free verse poetry similar to I guess like Allen Ginsberg in terms of like if you read Howl, it starts like there's an entry stanza and then it goes who did this, blah 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 blah, line break, who and I mentioned that before. I think I mentioned Howl before, but like so but not exactly like Howl, but in the sense of starting stanzas like that over and over again. I try to catch myself sometimes because I know it can, I know that can be a little too repetitive over time, unless you're creating a specific, mood. But I think sometimes as poets, we just, it's just it is kind of part of our distinctive style. And you know, it's kind of like when I'm writing something like that, it's almost like I'm writing music, especially when I'm writing something longer. Like I'm working on a verse novel or a poetic novel, and it's the first like 20 pages are kind of like an ode to Hal. So it's this whole thing where it's like a whole continuous thing where you're just kind of going in that you know. So anyway, the point is that you know, we all have ticks, and I think they're well. We don't have ticks, that would be bad, but yeah. Anyway, see what I did there. You know, so you know, I think as long as when you're writing a poem, you know, you're a poem or you know whatever, or epic poem, verse novel, whatever you're working on, you know, you're not what's the word I'm looking for? You're not being too, I guess, not too repetitive, because there's no such thing as being too repetitive, but you're not you know, you're not doing the same thing each time. You're being different every time.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah. I was just going to say that don't forget that humans, we talk in a certain rhythm, and that's why there's things like sonnets, because there's a certain rhythm to how we speak that just happens. And so that's like sometimes we're writing rhythmic poems because it does come out kind of naturally. And so, yeah, you can break it or not. I think that's up to it. Now, Angela, I put into the private chat, there's a word frequency counter that I sometimes use for both my fiction and my poetry to make sure I'm not overusing a word too much. Because when you're, especially like when you're writing a poem, unless you're doing some sort of particular emphasis and repetition, you actually do want to have like dark and night and, you know, other words for darkness. You don't want to keep saying dark every time, or, you know, my beating heart. But so, you know, in that case, you do want to break it, but in other cases, you want to keep the rhythm. And again, it all depends on the poem. But being aware of it, because if you're breaking a rhythm halfway through, like the example I gave of like a poem that started like a fairy tale, you know, that was an intentional breaking of that. And if you do it, you either like, if you've got a rhythm, you've got to go through, or have a reason that does become obvious why to break it.
Yeah, exactly.
I just wanted to ask, because Katie put in the next message about I need more tools for settling in.
Yeah, that's our next question.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if that's something you want from us, and if you can say a bit more what you mean by that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I think there's practices, like there's exercises, which KB Nelson gets to in the next comment. There's exercises you can do to start this. I mean, sometimes it's just, isn't that what a golden shovel is and stuff, where you can take like a line of something and now riff off that and make a poem or a prompt, or do a ekphrastic where you're looking at a picture. I mean, I think of those as tools to get you started, because you just want that place, you know, or you can think of a voice that you're going to put it in. You know, here's the idea I want to present. Whatever the idea is, you know, maybe talking about witchcraft or something. Now I'm going to put it in a voice that's non-conventional. A dog, you know, maybe a cat talking about being a familiar, or and the voice of a little boy who is lost in the woods, wondering where a witch might get him or something. Not to, you know, repeat stereotypes of witches, but, you know, something like that I think is a tool. I mean, what do you guys think?
Yeah, like if you use like for sestina, you have to have 6 words that then fall in the particular order in each stanza. So you could just choose 6 random words and then try and make each of your lines end in the correct order with that. Or you can actually start with your ending verse and write that and choose those 6 words and then go backwards with that. So in that case, that's a tool. And yeah, like you said, like either choosing a voice, a character, a message, ekphrastic, or like taking somebody else's poem and reversing it, writing the other version, like you gave as an example in the handout. You know, I think there's lots of different tools like that. So hopefully, I mean, and if people want for one of the assignments, if you guys are going like, I'm stuck, you can always email us and we'll give you a topic and make you write it. And then you can go, no, I thought of something better.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I feel like this, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Max.
Oh, and I was just gonna say, in terms of tools, like just like, I think I mentioned this in the first class. Like, I do those, like, what, I don't know, whatever the term is. Those, like, those pictures, like, until I get some sort of idea, or I'll just write words. I'll do a word tree. I mean, that's something Linda showed me. Like, I'll do that, or I'll just write either random thoughts, or or like, or even just, I think I mentioned this in the first class as well. Like, I'll like write letters to this imaginary character that I had created, until like some idea, something will happen. It's like exercise. Like, you do it enough, and yes, I have an old, like, quill pen that I'm, like, flailing around. Like you do something enough, then eventually, you'll stumble onto an idea or thought, or poetry. It's different from writing a story, like, a short story. Like, you can outline a short story. You can think of characters. You can do the same thing with poetry. You can think of characters. You can world build with poetry. You still think of characters and what those characters might do. But I think, when you're trying to, brainstorm poetry, I think you need to look at it as little windows into different parts of reality, or wherever, reality, or different snapshots of something that could or couldn't be, and just brainstorm what that could or couldn't be, what these gods or witches or people, or crazy wizards with their fountain pens are doing, and then then just kind of riff off that.
Yeah, like call and response could be like, KT, you could take a werewolf in the moon, have one give the call, one give the response, and write a poem on that. It could be a garbage man and a limb in the garbage.
Yeah.
So, in that, you can just pick 2 random topics. And really, if you are stuck, email us and we'll give you a suggestion.
Yeah.
We'll rev your engines.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jamal. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say something. I mean, the tool that I use is kind of weird and a little bizarre, but I feel like the moment I like to collect actual just ideas or lived experiences that mean a lot to me in moments. Like, sometimes you might be anywhere in the shower, walking on the train, or whatever, and these things come, and I like a big memo of that. And when I wake up in the morning, I look at it, and then ideas start to come from that, and I just start writing, and I flow and I free flow, and it just helps me get my ideas out, and it's a good way of discovering concepts and ideas that you might want to write about for your poem. So that's what something that I use as a tool. For me, it's just like the first thing in the morning before I'm affected by anything else in my brain, just going back to that memo, that list, and start building on whatever, extracting from that whatever catches my fancy. So
why do you think that's bizarre? That sounds kind of like a normal writer thing.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's just really like because it's weird to see somebody just they're awake but they're just laying still in one place. If you're around and you see, like, what the hell are you doing? Like, it looks like it looks like vampire shit. Like,
I'm thinking.
I have a whole essay on that in the StokerCon souvenir book about writers are like zombies.
Yes, I read that. That was so funny.
Writers and zombies and why we're alike.
And why you shouldn't kill zombies, because they're the larval form of writers.
Yes, so let zombies live, because one day they'll turn into poets. But anyways, not to go off on that. I do want to talk about call and response a little bit, because we keep mentioning it. And for anybody that's not familiar with it, as a tool to get started, I love call and response. That's actually, Maxwell and I did a call and response poetry book. And it was,
Mobius lyrics.
Thank you. Yeah, Mobius lyrics. And one reason we did that is because we were both super busy and we wanted to do a collaboration, and we weren't, living in the same state or anything. So we're going to have to try to do this remotely. And I think yeah, anyways, I think that was about it. But anyway, so we're like, oh, we could do a call and response and take two different perspectives, like always the polar opposite, and each just take one and then write a poem from that perspective. So we had like death, life, chaos. Yeah. I was going to say entropy is the opposite of that, but I just really like chaos. So, chaos and chaos. And
yeah, we didn't really we just picked random things. It wasn't really planned.
Yeah, and I think that worked really well to give it like a sense of cohesion and organization, but it wasn't really for us. We were, just meandering.
And you could actually like team up with somebody else to write a poem and just pick two subjects, because I've done this before. It's like, okay, I'm going to say glasses, and somebody else says bangs, and then write a poem that has both those things in it.
Yeah.
There's a challenge to try and like come up with a concept on that.
Yeah.
And you can always, I know Angel's working on a collection, and I just actually started a collection similar to it, but you can always take an existing poet's work and write a response to it. I actually wrote a response to an H.P. Lovecraft poem, What the Moon Brings, for an anthology that's coming out from Hippocampus Press. It's supposed to come out this year, I think, but take a poem or take a from a public domain author and write a like my poem was supposed to be just a continuation of What the Moon Brings. So take a poem and write write a continuation, or write I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Which I'm not gonna. I want to say like about how that's like scraping the internet, but this is not an AI panel, so let's go on. So I do want to KB's comment. I think of writing in form like the crazy creative jazz player practicing their scale chords, keeps the tool sharp, the poetic equivalent, honing your sensitivity to rhythm, rhyme, sound, etc. And I agree, that is one of the good things that. One of the beauty of working with form is it gets you to try new patterns, new sounds, and things like that.
And I would say perhaps that for anybody who is finding it hard because they're used to writing fiction, that trying form might actually serve you better in this way to get you into writing poetry, because it has that structure already.
Yeah, and sometimes it'll help you find new things in your story or the poem, vice versa. I used to always write a poem for a short story, like a poem equivalent of it. And a lot of times I would go back and add something to the story, because in the poem, it distills it down, and I realized there was something more that I wanted to put, which is starting with a form seems overwhelming. I'm thinking of maybe trying to take some of my flash fiction and try to create a poem from one or two. So basically what we're talking about.
I wanted to go to Chris's comment about starting longhand. I write everything longhand.
With that fancy pen?
No, this is just my little.
I have pen envy.
Well,
he's got a pen he could kill you with. It's heavy enough. Don't let him knock you on the head with it.
I was going to say the pen is mightier.
Such would I poke you in the eye. Go on. Though.
So I just wanted to comment that, like, so when I don't expect anyone to read any of this because it's chicken scratch, but like when I don't really try to divide any, like, I don't really, it depends. Like, I don't really try to divide the page normally, because for me, when I'm writing longhand, it's going to change when I put it onto the computer. I'm going to edit it as I'm typing it. I think visually, if you are writing longhand, it kind of helps to. Because I make a mess when I'm writing it. I'm going to write, I'm going to scribble, and then I know it's going to change entirely when it gets typed.
Yeah.
So
What do you guys think? I'm allergic to writing in longhand. My hand actually has lost the ability to write. I'm kind of like, I do this or this. So I cannot comment on writing longhand, really.
I actually do it a fair amount too. I always have some pen and paper with me. And because I'm an extrovert, I need to sometimes stop and have a drink somewhere where there's people and kind of be like a vampire and taking their energy. But
no judgment, weirdo.
But I also sit there and sometimes I'll just be looking around. Maybe I'm looking at people, maybe I'm thinking. I'll start writing down things, and I'm often working out sometimes the plot for a story, or I'll start writing and working on poetry. And like when I went to Spain one year, my collection, The Lore of Inscrutable Dreams, was in fact mostly written out in Spain, at least the roughs for most of the poems, because I was going like it's mostly about magical objects. So I was going, okay, what kind of magical objects are there? Okay, looking glass, there's a tooth fairy's pouch, and I'd start writing. And so I don't write everything out longhand, but I do a lot of it. And sometimes it helps me kind of congeal my ideas. And I just kind of, and anybody who's getting editing from me here, they might be hating it, but I have a stylus for my computer. And so I've been writing and editing in hand written stuff all over the page. So I do actually really prefer it for poetry to do at least part of it.
I feel like longhand is more emotional. Like I could get my emotions down quicker. It moves at like the speed of my feelings, and I could really get that out onto the page. And when I'm when I want to be in my heart, longhand helps. When I want to be in my head, using my iPhone for notes kind of helps. So I like to kind of start writing sometimes if I'm really passionate about, like frantically just get everything out, and then translate that to notes and then edit it in notes. For some reason that's what works for me. So
Yeah. So really, Angela's the weirdo here.
Yes, I am. I do jot down ideas all the time.
Oh yeah, sure.
So well, hey, this don't look. It looks like more like a to-do list, but it's my notes. Yeah, I do jot down ideas all the time, but there is something that I just love about a keyboard, and the whole setup feels very much like a Ouija board, which I have sworn off in college. I don't touch those anymore. But that's what it feels like to me. Like the mouse is the planchette, and I am channeling whatever from, onto the screen. And so it is like a super, almost like religious experience for me. I make sure my keyboard has to be just so. It's very tiny. I like a tiny keyboard with chiclet keys. They have to be backlit. So it's kind of like the same thing, though. It's whatever puts you in the mood. I do like Chris's thought, though, to like divide the page physically and put the words and phrases on the left and then start the poem from there. And I could see doing something like that because I tend to just jot like a random phrase that I'll hear from anywhere, and then I'll jot that down, and that winds up being the seed that a poem starts with. I do want to go back a little bit to KT Wagner's question, because I feel like we haven't answered it. I mean, I guess we've answered it. She wants to know how others do it, and going back to basically starting, like finding those tools to start it. And I feel like we actually have covered that pretty well. But I would say, like, and I'm going to go with try a form. Just start with a form, or take something like that poem that I reversed in the handout. I Googled happy sunshine poem free domain or something, and I do love ripping apart happy sunshine poems, and then just reversing
going to the dark.
Bring it to the dark. Does this poem make you happy? Let me have it. So those are all different ways to kind of get started with it, and mostly just don't be cruel to yourself. And especially because editing is where the magic comes in with a poem. I'll have a poem and somebody will go, wow, you sure like the dark. You talk about the dark like every other line. But then I go through and I start adding like umbrage instead of dark, or, midnight, and, coal, and all the other words you can have for dark. And that's, where it starts like sparking a little bit. So whatever you write, don't be
spark
mean
in the
to
dark.
it. Yeah, it could be a spark in the umbrage. And then the umbrage lights on fire. And now we have Canada for some reason.
So I think as writers, just
Oh,
going
I
back
see
to the
that.
fact that, you're talking about keyboard and planchette, we're talking about
Mhm.
pens and paper. We have this romanticism in us. Whatever it is, it's the romantic vision of us as writers. And poets have it even more. So yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, and like everyone else, my handwriting's messy, and in my book it's messy. But I've been taking with a poem I'm working on now, and just maybe as a teaching tool, I've been saving different versions of it so I can kind of show people the process of how ugly it starts. And Linda Addison, I took her StokerCon masterclass, which was using poetic technique in fiction and nonfiction. And she's going like, she's showing a couple things going, yeah, my stuff starts out ugly. And that's the thing, is like our raw is raw.
That's
And
right.
and then you hone it. You start, it's like the sculptor has the block of material, and then you start to shape it.
Yeah.
The main thing is just to get the truth out, right?
Mhm.
And the
Yeah.
first draft, just get the truth out. Just vomit it on the page. Just get the truth out, and then
Yeah.
go back and edit it and clean it up and fix it to whatever form you want.
Get those words out of the wardrobe, and then start seeing which ones fit.
Yep.
How
Yeah.
poetic of you!
That's I'm ripping off of your wardrobe quote.
I know that's funny.
Yeah, birth I think is always going to be messy. That's kind of the point of it. Look at birth, and then you have to edit that baby to make it palatable. Nobody wants that baby if it hasn't been edited. So, same
Edit
as
your
our
baby.
poems. I want to, I know we're running out of time, but I want to go over modern forms just really quickly, because that's one of the things that I think that we tend to think as poets is the villanelles and the forms that already exist are the only forms ever. You can never make a new form. I call bullshit to that. Make a new form. And if it works really well, we'll all copy you. And so some of the newer forms that have come out, which I was really surprised to find prose poetry on this list as I was researching, because I don't think of prose poetry as a newer form, and we can talk about that in a minute. But some of these forms, like flarf, a contemporary form of poetry that combines found language from various sources, including internet search results, spam emails, and other unconventional textual materials. And they're often humorous and absurd. And I've written one flarf and using Google, what does it mean to be human? And then I did a poem of that. I loved it. Not enough to do like tons of them, but then there's haiku. And I'm going to actually send this list to everybody in their handout, in another handout. So haiku is a concise poetic form consisting of a 3-line stanza. The first line has 1 word, the second line has 2 words, and the third line has 3 words. And it can be linked together to create longer poems. I won an award for a poem like that about Butterfly's Lie. And then I did it the first way, and then I reversed it the other way. So prose poetry blurs the line between poetry and prose. It is written in prose form, but maintains poetic elements such as imagery, rhythm, and heightened language. Cento, which I never heard of this. A cento is a form of poetry created by stitching together lines or passages from other poems. The resulting poem takes on a new meaning and often explores themes or ideas beyond original works. So that might be a good way to kickstart forms. Write a cento. Go to your poetry instructors as a massive flattery. No, I'm kidding. But you could take like poems on whatever, vampires, or poems on politics or something, and just start grabbing a line that really speaks to you and make a poem out of all the lines that really speak to you. And I bet you're going to have a pretty awesome poem. Golden shovels are one. I actually am supposed to be writing a bunch of golden shovels. Sorry, Amy, I'm going to do this.
So what is a golden shovel?
The golden
I actually don't know.
Yeah, well, Amy brought it up, and we're supposed to be writing a whole book of them, and I have not started yet. So a golden shovel is a form of poetry invented by Terence Hayes. It involves taking a line from an existing poem and using each word as the end word of each line in a new poem. Oh, I now remember why I haven't started this yet. The new poem is often in conversation with or pays homage to the original work. And she's written a couple, and I really like them. But it does involve a lot of like brain work that
What was that called?
so-
A golden shower?
a good-
No, Jamal, that's different.
Oh, my God.
That's another thing that we can
My
discuss
mistake. My
another
mistake.
time.
So you could write a golden shovel about a golden shower.
You could, if you can find, well, you have to find a poem about a golden shower first, and then you can write a golden shovel from the golden shower poem.
Maybe Burroughs had one.
And yeah, and now I have to try to do this. All right, looking up, are there poems about golden showers? And that's when the class got canceled. And then there's also, huh?
Oh, I was just going to say, like, in that with the found poems, is that
Mhm.
like, you know, you could listen to the radio and grab lines off the radio, or you could just do an internet search and take the first lines that show up in your Google search and like take those lines and slap them together and start trying to make a poem out of it.
Yeah, that's a flarf. And that flarf was awesome because it was, what does it mean to be human was the search. And then just taking those lines, I wound up having this, I obviously am a little biased, but I loved how it turned out because it was a commentary on being human. I actually did that as a challenge because somebody brought up flarf and I was kind of like, that's a stupid idea. Who would ever do that? That's a terrible idea. Let me try this. Oh, awesome. It's pretty cool. So erasure poetry is considered a newer form. Erasure poetry involves selectively erasing or blacking out words from an existing text, leaving behind only the chosen words to create a new poem. So blackout poetry. It explores themes of absence, silence, and reinterpretation. Or politics. We have, I think, Jean Flynn. I feel like I'm bringing her up too much, but as like a favored pupil. No. Jean did a erasure poem or a blackout poem with, it was a prime minister that was talking about, it was basically a political statement. So she used it in a political way. He was talking about, I can't remember what the actual political statement was talking about, but then she reversed it by taking out kind of all the unnecessary fluffy words where he was trying to hide the meaning, and then therefore highlighted the actual meaning of what was going on, like in a protest. So that was cool. And visual poetry focuses on the visual arrangement of words, letters, and symbols on the page or screen, often incorporates artistic elements. I think that's like also like a concrete poem.
Yep.
And then Insta poetry, which I did for April this year. Insta poetry refers to poetry that's primarily written and shared on social media platforms like Instagram. I did that for a whole month, and I used a line of poetry and then ran it through Midjourney to see what Midjourney read out of that poem. That was fun. And Twitterature. No, Midjourney, because I wrote my poem line, like I wrote the poem line, then I dropped that into Midjourney as a prompt and then saw what visual thing happened from that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And that was fun. And then Twitterature. Twitterature is also known as twaiku, is a form of poetry created.
Sorry.
You did what? You scoffed.
I scoffed.
Twaiku. Well, see, now you have to try it, just like I had to try flarf when I scoffed.
Probably I do. Yeah.
I mean, except Twitter is now dead, but you know. But anyways, Twitterature, back when there was this social media called Twitter, and it's within the constraints of Twitter's character limit, which I don't think Twitter has that character limit anymore for some. I guess they still do. I don't know.
What is it, 46 characters or something?
Yeah, I think so. So, and then coming back to here, because we are actually just about at time. Pixie says, I fight with for prose fiction as a poetry. That is like a poem right there. I struggle, fight with for prose fiction as a poetry primer writer, KT. But forms intimidate me. So I'm reverse engineering from end words. End stop, drop mic.
Yo.
Yeah, sorry, we're so goofy, everybody. I think that we're doing this, we're illustrating that poetry it doesn't have to be the super esoteric, snobby. It's a very fun, it doesn't have to be pretentious. You can have fun with it. You can break it, you can destroy it, you can rebuild it, you can form chaos with it. You can become, unless it's a sonnet, and then you're just, you just smile.
Or a Sestina.
Or Sestina. Yeah. Oh, yeah, because we're talking about forms. Yeah, so you can't always break everything, but. So. But all right, how about you guys? You got anything on, super inspirational to say on me saying how you should break all forms?
Well, all I can say is that their poems have been getting better and better that they've been sending in every week. It was really, really good this time around. So,
Yes.
good job, guys. Really, really fun to read. Really great.
Yeah.
You
Even
know?
though I haven't responded, I've been reading them all, and they're fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I am really excited. I don't think we have any poems in here that I have read that I was like, all excellent, which I've actually gotten a little bit nervous. I was like, oh, these people punked us because they're actually all really great poets. They're not here to learn, they're here to criticize us. We're on to you guys.
But every writer, no matter how published or not, can always do with feedback. You get another perspective, right? So
exactly.
It's like, I'm in a critique group because I need other eyes on my poems.
Yep, I agree. So I think that wraps it up for this week. What do you guys think?
Yeah, and you just need to tell them that your assignment, should you choose to accept it,
yep, the assignment is
based on a form.
Yep. And you guys have a handout with some information on that. There's 5 sample forms that you can try: an acrostic, a cinquain, Fibonacci, tanka, and of course, the dreaded sonnet. I mean, I don't mean dreaded. I mean,
the sonnet about dread.
Breaded.
If you do want to try a sonnet, you can do a modern sonnet, and it doesn't have to rhyme.
And we've mentioned so many forms, so there's a lot of choice here.
Yeah, and now I do feel like I'm gonna have to do a sonnet now because I've kind of griped about it so much.
Like I think I have to do one too.
Yeah,
we were gonna do the slug sonnets. Don't forget.
We are. I felt like we already did that, but that was probably just me, like trying to get out of it. But we will do that.
I think I don't have to do one because you're not doing it.
Because Jamal's like, y'all said there's no rules here, so. All right, I'm going to let you all go with that. Next week, week 5 already, playing with sound. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. Rhyme, alliteration, assonance, not ansonance, but assonance. Onomatopoeia, talking about the musicality of language. So that's going to be really fun. Again, have your poem sent to us by Wednesday. I am doing a bunch of critiques tonight. I'm a little behind. You're going to get those tonight from me. I can't think of anything else.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to our crazy talk.
Yeah, everybody has pen envy now from Maxwell's pen. All right, thank you guys, and we will see you next week, and we'll talk about sound.